sorry, I'm not a Mac user. I'm also not an iPhone user, so sorry.
No, that's not what I meant, but it's like people who share screen here show that they use a Mac.
Yeah, they tend to be the more creative people, right?
Maybe.
Maria-Elena, do you want to share a screen, a slide, something?
No, I have prepared here a text like Daniel.
Okay, all right. So we have another 2 minutes, and then let's see if other people step in. We'll give it another few minutes after 7. Christian, you are all set. You will follow later on the questions in the chat in the Zoom. Are you set up to follow the? Are you set up to monitor any questions in the other streaming channels?
Yes, and check everything. Don't worry.
Just for your information, guys, we are already live apparently.
Oh.
Yeah. So the stream is working, which is great.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's not a big problem. I mean, this is somewhat a little bit a meet-up between us ordinary citizens talking to each other, and we share this experience with the whole of Europe. So it's fine if it's not entirely official.
It only shows the person who's talking. Should we show like the full participants, 2 or more people, or just the one talking right now?
Sorry, say that again.
Like in the live stream in YouTube, there's only the person that's speaking is the only one that appears. Is that going to be like that?
I don't control that, so I don't know. We Volt YouTube. Can you tell us how you stream? Do you show only the people who talk, or do you show the gallery?
I think they'll figure it out. I think we should maybe just start.
Yeah.
And to the question from Walt YouTube, I think what people want is that we don't have the speaker view. So not only like when I'm speaking, you can only see me. People want to see everyone.
I think so. Yeah.
Different videos. So that would be great. You have to change it at the top right. But I think we should start now. Peter, do you want to introduce?
Yeah. Right. So welcome to everyone. This is our second event where we try to have conversations between various cities. Volters are active in the European Union. The first time it was Bologna, Berlin, Barcelona that came together, and this time we have Messina in the south of Italy, Porto in Portugal, Stuttgart and Hamburg in the south and in the north of Germany. The overall theme, we called it exit from the lockdown, because more or less that's the stage at which we all are in this pandemic, although I would say in certain other continents like Latin America, Africa, this is definitely not yet the case. I would like to give, I'm the facilitator, Peter. Christian, for those of you that see us in the gallery, Christian is my co-facilitator. He will help with the inputs of questions during the question and answer period, and in the second phase of this meeting after the conversations. Maybe to those that are following us on the live stream, the public part of this get-together will take about 1 hour. It will be introduced by Johannes and it will be concluded by Johannes. Before we go there, a few tips for those that are in the Zoom event. You are asked to switch off to mute your microphone, but all of you are encouraged to switch on your video, because that's the main purpose, that we go beyond only the talk. We also see each other and maybe we can contribute also a little bit with some body language, smiling, crying, whatever you want to do. Another thing I would like to ask you, if you go either on your name in the list of participants and in the option more that appears there, or in your own video screen on the top right, the 3 dots, you have the possibility to rename yourself. I would like to ask you all to just insert your first name, and then after your first name, the city from where you are joining us. Okay? Then the question and answers we will primarily do, we'll see a little bit how it goes, and it also depends on the number of participants. The questions you have in the question and answer time, or contributions you may have, we ask you to do them in the Zoom chat. So writing in the chat, you can switch that on and off also at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And Christian will monitor your questions, and then they will be brought to whoever you address the question to. So when you have a question and it's specifically to one person, we ask you to specify the person whom you are asking the question. As I said, the public event is about an hour, and then we have 30 minutes among voters in a conversation mode. If at any moment you really feel that you would like to have the floor to talk, you can raise your hand. Now you do that either in your video, either with an object or your hand, or you should also see at the bottom of the list of participants a blue hand which says raise hand. And that's a bit less intrusive than we can see, and Christian will warn me that somebody would like to say something. All right. Are there any questions on these practical issues? Okay. Then, Christian, maybe one last thing. Please give me somehow a sign. I'm also having Christian on Telegram. If there are still people entering and I don't see that I have to admit them, okay? All right, so we have 14 people here. We will be all very curious how many people will be following us on the live stream. I guess we will hear that afterwards. Johannes, I'd like to give you the floor to give some introductory remarks.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm very happy that we managed to set up the second of these calls. And I think we involved, in general, we strive to unite Europe because we think that we together are better suited to solve the big problems of our times. Let it be climate change, or let it be a pandemic which swipes around the globe. And what we experienced in Volt, and I think also in Europe in general, is that although the pandemic is somewhat the same, so the disease is the same in all countries, it is still perceived very differently because the regional aspects of the pandemic are very different. The situation in Italy, northern Italy, in March is not comparable to the situation of Belgium in April, and there are so many different perspectives emerging that we feel it's really important to connect these different perspectives to get a common view on this pandemic in Europe, because finally, whether we manage to get over this pandemic and to come out strengthened out of it is a question for the whole of Europe, and it's really a question of us citizens, because lockdown measures and exit from lockdown and so on, they rely on us. So we feel that's very important to connect the reality, to shape a response together, and to shape a feeling of togetherness across the continent. And that's why we are here. And somehow this is a complement to all this kind of high-level talk where if Macron and Merkel meet each other and decide on something or make a proposal. That's very important and very, very, very good.
was not thinkable 100 years ago. But Europe has also to grow from bottom up. So we have to talk to each other and not talk about each other. And I think it's still happening far too often in Europe that we as Germans talk about the Italians and the Italians talking about the Germans. Instead, the Germans are talking with Italians. And so this is the main purpose of this call, that we talk to each other about our lives within the pandemic. And first step to finding solutions together is exactly this. So yeah, so I'm very happy that we have 4 cities from not Stuttgart because of the somewhat and sometimes weird federal system in Germany. Yeah, so that's it from me, and I'm looking forward to hear your stories. Likely the first agenda point is once again myself, because I want to give an introduction to the overall picture of the pandemic on the world and in Europe.
Johannes?
Yeah.
If any one of you have already a comment or a question, feel free to enter them in the chat, the written chat box, so we can see if we insert it before the question and answers. Thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I hear that I'm lagging, so that's unfortunate, but there's nothing I can do about. So sorry for that. Yeah, we heard already the pandemic seems to get under control in Europe. So in most European countries, and that's obvious, the numbers are going down. That's actually not true for all European countries. There are still a few European countries which have not brought the pandemic under control. So we are not talking about end the pandemic in Europe, because this will not happen, unfortunately, but bring it under control. And what do we mean by bringing under control? We mean that we are not in need of a global lockdown anymore, because we can trace and test all the cases and then contain all the pandemic on a local level. So what happened in the first wave of the pandemic is that everything got out of control and we could not manage to keep track on all the cases. So we had to lock down the whole economy, and this was very harmful, obviously, for the economy, but necessary to limit the impact of the pandemic. And now we are coming back to the stage where it seems possible that we can back to the possibility of tracing all the cases. So and where this level is, where we can all trace all cases, this is very different from country to country, and this is dependent on the infrastructure within the country. So for Germany, it's probably around a few hundred cases per day, but it may be different in Italy, maybe different for Spain. So when a pandemic is under control, it's a very local thing. And because this is a very local thing, the European Commission and all the countries developing exit strategies, which are actually based on local strategies. So they say, okay, we do green zoning. So these are allowed to go out and these are allowed to travel, even across borders, even have tourism between these two regions, which are under control, and other countries or other regions where it's not under control have to endure further lockdown measures. And this leads to some strange situation. For example, one of the countries where the lockdown is not, where the pandemic is not under control yet is Sweden. So in Sweden, we have constant high case numbers since 6 weeks. And we should not believe that this kind of strategy leads to some kind of herd immunity, because there was a recent study showing that in Stockholm, the most affected region and the most affected city in Sweden, only 7.3 persons had antibodies. So this is far away from any herd immunity. So really to get in a stage where we can reopen the society, we need to bring the cases down. And this is done in most European countries, and that's why we see the exit from the lockdown. But we always need to stay alert, because in other parts of the world, the pandemic is raging. So especially Latin America, it's the numbers are dreadful. Also, India looks very, very worrying, because these countries are not in a place where they can maintain a lockdown for a long time, because the people would starve. So if you have an emerging country or a developing country in pandemic, it's not feasible for them to just put a hold on the economy for 2 months, like in Germany or the Netherlands or Italy. And this means that we have always the risk of new cases. So it will affect us for a very long time. Now, an interesting thing is that a lot of people are saying, yeah, the lockdown killed the economy. And we are heading straight toward a big recession. That's clear. So the forecast of the European Commission says 9.5% minus this year for Italy, and 6.5% minus for Germany, and even Sweden with the mild lockdown has a minus of 6.1%, and Denmark 5.9%. And the problem of these numbers is that they come on top of the average disbalance in the European economy. So the hardest affected country by the economic downturn are Spain, Italy, Greece, and Croatia, while the northern countries are not so much affected. And this is also related to the fact that tourism is completely shut down. So countries which are reliant on tourism have a higher burden in their economics. So this is a big problem for the European Union, and I think it will be one of the key areas where we need to come to European solutions, balancing these imbalances out. Now I want to close with one very important insight of the study from the Helmholtz Institute and the IFO Institute, so Economic Institute and the Health Institute in Germany, which show that there is a reversed U-shaped association, we call it in statistics, between the lockdown measures and the economic harm. So they show conclusively that if you have a high infection rate and no lockdown measures, it will cost the economy in the long term more than if you have a relatively strict lockdown. But if you do the lockdown too strict, you will add unnecessary harm to the economy. So there is a middle point of lockdown measures which is optimal in terms of economics. So it's not just like we open up and then everything is good for the economy. No, it's not that simple, because if we open too much up, we get situations like in New York, like in Bergamo, like in northern Italy, and then we would have to shut down the whole economy once again. So we have to strive for a certain balance between the lockdown measures and the economic consequences, that we find this middle way between too strict and too laissez-faire. And obviously nobody has done this. So it's very important that we together learn how to do this, because the second wave will probably come in autumn or in winter or in late summer, we don't know. And then we must have learned our lessons that the impact is lessened. And with this, I stop because I probably talked too long already.
Thanks a lot, Johannes. No, you're doing fine. Thanks. Very complex, but clearly explained your view, the sources of information you use. Again, everyone is encouraged to enter comments or also questions as we go in the chat. We'll hear from Christian if questions from outside are coming. I would like to now go city by city. So all the 4 participating cities will share some of their experiences, perspectives on the whole situation. And then after that, we will have about 20 minutes question and answers, each one to everyone else. Okay, so let's start with Messina, Marielena. Just for my information, are you the only one talking, or do you, because some cities want to have 2 short presentations?
Yes, it will be just myself.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. So I would like to give a brief, let's say, background of the situation, the current situation right now in Italy. Let's say that during these months of lockdown, many law decrees by the government have been issued according to the different stages of the spread of the virus. A law decree is a particular decree issued by the government under exceptional circumstances of necessity or urgency that lasts only 30 days. Then it has to be approved by the parliament or being repelled. And this is what happened to many of these law decrees that have been following during this lockdown. And so the Italian government focused on its measures to exit from the lockdown on 3 main topics, which is reopening shops and activities, traveling, and economic support. In fact, regarding the economic support, this last law decree provides for the allocation of 55 billion euros to help businesses, families, workers, and the healthcare system. But now let's go back to the main measures that have been planned to exit from the lockdown, which is a delicate stage, which in Italy has become known as phase 2. So phase 2 in Italy here started on the 4th of May, when many activities were allowed to reopen, even though with strong limitations. For example, bars and restaurants were allowed to open only for takeaways. Then, on the 18th of May, phase 2 was fully implemented. Commercial activities were allowed to let clients in, with the obligation of respecting social distancing and also providing for regular disinfection of the facilities. Moreover, for shopping centers, it is mandatory to measure the temperature of customers before entering the facility with an infrared thermometer. So the shops and activities are trying to apply these measures, but it's not always that simple, because the government issued, let's say, general guidelines that can be applied to all kinds of activities. For this reason, some of these activities can reopen. For example, because the shop is too small, the bar, the restaurant, it's too small, and people can't respect social distancing. And there is not an area outside the shop, the bar, the restaurant that can be used by the owner. So this is not economically feasible for many small activities. That's why many of them are remaining closed here in Messina and in a closed city, which is Taormina, which is very famous for tourism.
Excuse me, Marielena, your microphone is moving, please. So there is some noises. Okay, thank you. Thanks so much.
Sorry for that. Okay, it's better now? Okay, okay. So, but we have to say that Italian regions are allowed to modify some measures and adapt them to the local situation, which is extremely different among the regions. We have to say that half of the entire number of affected cases here in Italy are found in the region of Lombardy, while in southern regions, the number of cases is much lower than those in northern and central Italy. So here I will focus on my city, Messina, which is a city that relies heavily on tourism. The attention is focused on beach resorts, for example. According to the last law decree, from the 22nd of May, bars and restaurants within the resort can reopen, while the bathing season will start on the 6th of June. The resorts will have to respect the same measures which are planned for the rest of the activities, which is social distancing, regular disinfections, temperature checked when entering. But in addition, for those customers who don't speak Italian, the resorts will have to provide a person which guides these customers on the safety rules that must be followed. So regarding traveling, which is one of the hot topic here in Italy, from the 18th of May, citizens are allowed to travel within their region without the specific document which is called self-certification, which was mandatory before to move from your house to any other place. However, the self-certification is still needed to travel to another region, and all kinds of gathering are still forbidden, indoors and outdoors. But from the 3rd of June, Italy will reopen its borders to EU countries. So it will be possible for people to come from EU countries to come here, but it won't be possible to travel from and to non-EU countries. And lastly, from the economical point of view, Italy focused on 2 types of support. The first type are bonuses and other support measures to families, like food stamps or small incomes, and also for businesses, like grants for small and medium enterprises, and a strengthening of welfare safety nets. For this aspect, we have to say that also regions and cities have provided additional funds, like Messina too, an additional fund to support the most vulnerable groups of the population. Right. The second type of financial support provided by the government are state guarantees for loans asked by companies. In this way, we hope that banks will be more willing to give loans to companies, because those money which will not be paid, cannot be paid by companies, will be paid by the government, by the state, sorry. But however, we have to say that it is not perfectly clear how many of these financial supports will be distributed. More details will be provided in the following weeks. So this is overall for Messina, and I will leave the floor to the next city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marilena. Very nice to hear a perspective and a description of the situation from the south of Italy, because indeed, everybody, I remember me living in Bologna, being called from people in the Netherlands or elsewhere, oh my God, you better leave as soon as possible because everybody is dying in the north of Italy. And not realizing, Holland being a small country, that even Bologna and Milan is a good 200, 260 kilometers apart, where in Holland you would already have left the country and be somewhere in Germany. Anyway, let's go to Porto, Daniel Gaio. And if you are to maybe very quickly tell me that whether you have 1 or 2 presentations.
Well, it's going to be me presenting, and I'll be focusing on the point of a possible step back from the lift of our current lockdown in Portugal as well as in France, because it's 2 countries that spoke about a possible step back from the lift. And what I mean is, for example, in Portugal and France, some schools have already started opening, taking classes again. Not in Portugal, universities are still closed though. It's only high schools and those kinds of schools. But in some schools in France, some students have been tested with COVID-19. And because of that, this week, 50 schools closed. And yesterday, I went to check, and that was true. And 20 more schools had closed by yesterday. So in France, 70 schools closed, as in a second temporary lockdown with a more local approach. So, and in Portugal, our own Prime Minister said that we might need a second lockdown even before the second wave of the coronavirus, if the virus spreads after we lift our lockdown. Of course, that this is very bad for our economy, and the people are eager to get out, the people are eager to explore, but it's a reality. And in some Portuguese schools, there have been found some COVID-19 cases after our first lift. So those those schools are thinking about closing again temporarily in a more local solution. And I think that the countries need to give some power to their regions to do this willingly, to be the regions themselves thinking if they can open or not. Because in some countries like Germany and France, they can do that. In some others that are more centralized, like Portugal, it doesn't work as such. It's a lot more of a national idea. The whole country does it, or the whole country doesn't do it. And I think that we have to ponder that we might need a second lockdown, even if it's local. And our own Prime Minister said that there's no shame in doing that in a speech that he did earlier this month, I think. And in Porto, in more local problems, Porto is a very big district with many cities, some of which have been incredibly inefficient at helping its citizens and distributing the masks, gloves, and alcohol they promised. For example, in the city of Gaia, they promised thousands and thousands of free masks to the population. Some of those masks suddenly disappeared. They just vanished. Some of the gel also vanished. Some of the gloves also vanished. Nobody knows how, why. And when they started distributing them, they forgot about the less populated areas and the more rural areas. They went more to the cities. And of course, that's more important because there's more people living there. There's more concentration of population. But at the same time, it gives a bad image to the people that live in the more rural areas because they are completely forgotten in these times. And I think that's about it for me. I only wanted to speak about this second lockdown that could be local, because it's something that's being very ignored in the mainstream media, and many governments aren't speaking about it, while it's already happening in France, and it may even happen in Portugal, a centralized country.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Interesting. The second lockdown, indeed. I don't know about others. We'll hear that in question and answers. We have heard that also in northern Chinese cities and some part of South Korea, this has happened. And indeed, I guess many of us are curious or worried whether this will happen to us, like when now people crowd in shopping malls and on beaches.
Yes, of course we are, because the moment we started lifting the lockdown here in Portugal, in my city, in Porto, people started queuing for clothing stores like Zara, H&M. People just made queues that were as long as the streets to enter and shop for whatever. And I think that, well, people were being so cautious at home for a whole month or a month and a half. And now that we lift a little bit, the people crowd the entire streets. The police is always going to the beaches to take the people out of the beaches, to tow their cars. It's not being very well organized in a local level.
Thanks, Daniel. Okay, let's move to Stuttgart. Moritz, if I'm well informed, you will have two short experiences, opinions, presentations for us, right?
Yes, and I will present with Friederike, who is also the city lead of Stuttgart, and she will start with the presentation.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So our presentation really focuses on Stuttgart and not on the situation in Germany altogether. So I first would like to show you some numbers. Basically, just locally in Stuttgart, we had in total 1,436 infected and 57 deaths. So here I just put the numbers from when the recording for Stuttgart started, which was in April, to now, so that you can see how COVID has been spreading here. And then, yeah, I summarized here some of the restrictions special to Stuttgart. So basically, I think as everywhere, big events are cancelled and they keep being cancelled. Shops, except for grocery stores, were completely closed, and now they're opening again with restrictions. So, like, there's a certain number of people who can be in the shop per square meter. You have to wear face masks and stuff like this. For childcare, schools, and universities, they were also completely closed. And this month, the childcare facilities can open at 50% capacity in Stuttgart, and next month the schools will reopen, but the age groups will have to alternate weekly. So that means, for example, in grammar school, 1st and 2nd grade will be there in week 1, and 3rd and 4th grade will be there in week 2, and then again the other way around. Shopping continues to be mask only, and we have a contract restriction in place at least until the 5th of June, which basically states that a maximum of 2 people can meet in public areas, and so unless they're family living in one household, then it could be more people. So yeah, then of course all cultural touristic sport facilities were closed down, and they're now slowly reopening. Same for hotels and restaurants. And yeah, for hospitals and retirement homes, it was basically for 2 months that no visitors were allowed at all. But now they opened a little bit. And so for every person living or being either in a hospital or living in a retirement home, 1 person per day can visit. Moritz, it's up to you.
Yes, now we'll focus on, let's just start like this. We are quite embarrassed with the next part of the presentation because we are, the city leads from Stuttgart, and Friederike and I and our team, we don't really know why we have such big protests in Stuttgart. So for those, who don't know a lot about Stuttgart, Stuttgart is like pretty much in the central of Germany. We are known for producing cars like Mercedes especially. And in Germany, we have people say that we are very structured, we are quite conservative, we want to take things very clearly, and we're not known to, be outspoken, and we're not known to upset people. That's why it's really surprising right now that Stuttgart has the highest density of protests. Like, a lot of people are protesting against Corona, not against the virus, but against the measures that are taken. And yes, so right now, between 5,000 and 10,000 people actually are joining this protest with outrageous conspiracy theories that we will see on the next slide. And Friederike, maybe you can go to the next slide. Yeah, and as I already talked with Danielle, apparently in Porto, there are the same conspiracy theories. I don't really think that, they differ, the conspiracy theories globally. I think the conspiracy theories in New York are the same that we have in Stuttgart or the same that we have in Porto. And they're pretty much always, anti-vaccines, anti-Bill Gates, anti, the measurements. And it must be quite frustrating right now to be in politics in Germany right now, because if you're doing a good job and the virus doesn't really spread, then people will sort of say, well, you see, the virus isn't dangerous at all. That's why the measures shouldn't be taken. However, if you are not successful and people die, then people in Germany, especially people in Stuttgart, would lose their shit, and they would go, how dare this happen? So whatever you do right now as a politician, you can't really
you can't make anyone happy right now. And yeah, my favorite conspiracy theory, to be honest, is that 5G transmitters are spreading the coronavirus. I think that's the best one from all, next to Bill Gates. Yeah, but if you have any questions, and again, we can't really tell you why Stuttgart is so dominant when it comes to protesters. But if you have any other question regarding Stuttgart and regarding, you know, us leaving the lockdown, then feel free to ask them.
Great. Thank you, Friederike and Moritz. The perspectives and experiences in Stuttgart. Indeed, many of us know as the Mercedes town. Questions, please put in the chat so that Christian can have collect them all, and we'll come to the questions and answers, and maybe also a little bit of conversation after the last presentation. And so I would like to invite David in Hamburg to share whatever you would like to share with us.
No, thanks ever so much, Peter, and yes, and thanks again for this fantastic format. I really love that. The entire Hamburg team is now strictly working on the fantastic digital retreat on the weekend. So it seems that I'm the only representative here, but nevertheless, lots of love from everyone from Hamburg. And yes, we are also kind of. I'll give you perhaps a brief overview over the current numbers, and to let some light into the room. Actually, it was quite nice because the Public Health Institute in Hamburg, the day before yesterday, actually announced that there were no. For the first time ever, there were no new corona cases documented. So the number currently in Hamburg, we have roughly 5,050 cases, meaning that's roughly 270 cases per 100 inhabitants. And we are so there was a very sort of uplifting news the day before yesterday when they announced those numbers. And now to as Johannes already mentioned, the public health in Germany is always so-called Ländersache, meaning that all 16 counties in Germany are deciding autonomously on their respective corona exit strategies, and nevertheless they all share the expertise of respected scientific institutes such as Robert Koch Institute for Infectious Disease, the Helmholtz Center for Infection Research, and the National Academy of Sciences Leopoldina, where more than 1,600 scientists are associated. So the latter published its first expertise on an exit strategy on Easter Monday, and it was then quickly followed taken up by Hamburg, whose mayor is, as you might all know, a doctor by profession. So he followed up on the recommendations given there. And to give you an idea about the nature of the exit strategy in progress, I will just give you a brief overview of various areas, both in public and private life, how this unfolds, and sort of how Hamburg is dancing, if you like to take up this nice metaphor of the hammer and the dance. So currently in the public spaces, naturally you always have to keep the official distancing rule of 1.5 meters. But granted that you do that, now up to 10 members of 2 households combined are allowed to actually spend time together. you have the restaurant situation. Guests need to register in advance, while also keeping the distance naturally with 1.5 meters at all times. And the shops also all open now, granted that you comply with the hygiene rules and that you only have, I believe it was like one customer per 10 square meter. Markets are already open. Demonstrations, not as many as in Stuttgart, but also a couple of those were allowed. Also for next weekend, you have things like Black Liberation Movement and a sort of collective meditation on peace. The Falun Gong movement is demonstrating, and this is all in the range of roughly 25 to 50 people. Like another bigger demonstration on the Leave No One Behind, Cheers to World Europe, was not allowed. Then you have the universities and the essential exams. So those exams are allowed to take place. Continuing further down the education road, starting next Monday, pupils will be allowed to stay in school, and actually they should be in school, meaning that each pupil will spend like roughly 5 to 6 hours at school. As for kindergartens, very, very critical naturally for all households. One mother sort of stirred quite a rage last week in Hamburg when she sent a bill for when she actually presented the mayor of Hamburg with a bill for the sort of the hours she took for taking care of her children. That's those kindergartens also in the process of being reopened. So we're starting next Monday with the 5 to 6 year olds, and then gradually continuing until July, opening the entire kindergartens for also the newborn ones. So that's starting on Monday, and with sports, individual sports are allowed to pursue even team sports, but only like for granted that you only pursue fitness and goal shooting practices, for instance. Playgrounds open, museums, memorial sites, botanical gardens are reopened, and services in churches, mosques, and synagogues are allowed, granted that there's no singing, so no hallelujah for the time being. And Hamburg also opened its 60% of its hotel rooms for tourists. So very closely aligned with that measure is one natural Hamburg experience, the harbor boat trips. So when you come to Hamburg, you're allowed to take a harbor boat trip, which is granted also that you have only 50% of the usual occupancy rate on a boat. So that is how Hamburg is sort of waltzing along, and the next update on the new measures will be taken next Wednesday. So then I can keep you updated then afterwards. So, but that's it from me from Hamburg. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Interesting to see the differences in various parts of the federal country, Germany, contrary to what Daniel shared with us, where in Portugal things are much more centrally decided. Also interesting to see the various consequences in various parts of society, education, going out, etc., etc. All right, so we have done the round of the 4 cities that participate today. We now go into, we are a little bit behind schedule, but I would still like to dedicate the next 20 minutes. And I would like to give for that the floor to Christian. I would say, Christian, just start wherever you want to start with the questions.
Yes.
Go as long as you like. Maybe at the end of the 20 minutes, we leave, if there are many questions, because I lost a bit the overview, we still leave a few minutes for contributions.
I think we have some question, maybe interesting question. It's one for Maria Elena. There were reports of the mafia trying to take advantage of the situation. How do you feel is the situation in Messina? I think this is a good question, so please, thank you.
Yes. Unfortunately, the situation here in Messina too is not good at all, because mafia, as I said in the comments, is very subtle and tries to get into everything it can. So we have to say that before this last law decree, which, as I told you, there are 55 billion euros allocated, but people still don't know exactly how they will be allocated. Companies which are in very hardship, which are experiencing a very difficult period, the last resort are these criminal organizations, which at least give them let's say a breath with financial support, but the consequences, as you can imagine, are very bad. So we are trying to tackle, let's say, to talk about this topic, to make it relevant to the people. For example, my team of Molte Messina will hold an event on the 12th of June on our Facebook page. There will be a live streaming we will talk with associations which fight every day with these criminal organizations like Libera, which is very famous here in Italy, and also with the entrepreneurs of the area, which can give their point of view on what is really happening in companies and small enterprises. So unfortunately, it is a huge problem, and but we try to do something to tackle it.
Okay, thank you. There is another one very quickly, Marilena. How are you approaching the opening of schools? Are they any plan executed?
Yes, I forgot to mention in my recap, because there are so many things to say. And yes, schools will reopen in September. And right now, the exams that are allowed in presence are only for the high school, which will be held from at the end of June, beginning of July. Of course, respecting all the measures of social distancing and so on. Universities and all other types of school, from primary, secondary school, are having lessons provided online, and also exams are being taken online. So right now, this is the actual the current situation, let's say.
Okay, thank you. There is a question to Daniel. Daniel implied that rural areas were somewhat forgotten in the response to the pandemic in Portugal. The question is, do you have the feeling that is true for Germany and Italy as well? Maybe it's not for you.
It's a question for the others. So,
For the others.
yeah, because
Yeah.
Daniel already explained that he thought that there is a problem in the response in Porto.
In Porto, there's like the city and the rural area. And the city has a bit of everything, the rural area has a lack of everything. I can speak for the Italian case or the...
Okay, maybe someone else can answer, David or Maria Elena, about it.
So at least in Germany, the rural areas are treated like the cities. Also, since our system is not a centralized one, but a federal one. So if you have a state with lots of rural areas, they will adapt their regulations accordingly.
Okay, thank you so much. We have some questions from YouTube if you want to go now. There is one for Johannes. You're lucky. Question for Johannes. Once everyone had a turn, Apple and Google collaborated on a Bluetooth-based solution for tracking. Any insights on a possible integration on EU side?
Yeah, so tracking apps are a hot topic across the EU as well, and there are several projects, also pan-European projects of several research institutes working on such apps. So it's actually such tracking apps are from a technical point of view, they are not too complicated. And so there are actually possible European solutions available. The question, however, with tracking apps is whether they would be politically used. So, I mean, there are always the problems with data security, or the feeling that there is a problem with data security, although smartphone is quite, I mean, Apple can track me anyway, but yeah, so it's not the problem. So the problem is not whether it's developed, but whether it's used. And I don't know whether a EU solution would be more used than an Apple or yeah, Google solution. So that's my stance. I have the feeling in the moment it's just not, it would not be politically feasible, because to make it work, really 60% of the population would have to install these kind of app on the smartphone, and I don't see this happening at the moment.
Okay, thank you. The last one, maybe Peter, you can answer to this one. Hi everyone, I'm from Bologna, Italy. In my areas, I see a lot of teenagers who don't respect the rules of the physical distance and don't use the mask. This is true. To be honest, I saw a lot of this. What can the government do for this problem? This is a big question, Peter. It's for you. The microphone.
You have muted.
It's I live in a very rural area. I live about 40 minutes drive from Christian, who lives right in town. So I cannot tell much about it. I do know that the authorities that can fine us, Carabinieri, Polizia Locale, etc., they definitely do. I was on my bicycle about 3 weeks ago in a totally isolated area, and had to pay 280 euros because I was cycling about 3 kilometers from my house. So formally speaking, they were right. Maybe they had more useful things to do in town, but okay. So I don't know. I find it difficult to wear a mask myself. I hear on radio that you're supposed to, especially if you use your mask a lot because you're close to other people, you would change your mask 3 times a day. I have 3 masks at home, which I use since the thing has begun. I don't ever change them. I have this crazy idea, I don't know if this is fake information, that if you hang your not very much used mask out in the air for 2-3 days, that the virus is gone. But I may be completely wrong. Thanks.
Okay, maybe there is another question, but this is the last one. This is question is for Daniel. This is true, Daniel. This is for you. Do you think that Portugal would have done a better job if it was not a centralist country?
I think so. I always defended that the capital can't take all the decisions for the rest of the country, and that local problems require some local solutions. Because the government says, okay, let's do plan X. And in Portugal, we have many realities. We have the realities of the rural areas and the deep rural areas, the part of the, it's not like an Alps, but the mountainous area, the people that live in the cities, the people that live in small towns and villages, very different realities. And the plan made it unstable. Like some resources would come to some places faster, some cities that weren't as bad as others got more equipment than the others. That happened all over the place because the capital was in charge of almost everything. When this started, Porto, my city, was the most affected city in the whole country. We needed more ventilators, we needed more resources overall. And the capital saw that, well, we are going to buy, I think it was 500 ventilators, and more than half will be in Lisbon, and something like 70 will go to Porto. And we had almost twice as infected as they had, but still the power was centralized. So most of the resources went to the capital, and the little scraps will be distributed to the rest of the country. So I think that if we were more regionalized, this would have been better handled.
Okay, perhaps a last question to Stuttgart. Can you say something to the demographics and the people who are protesting? Are they right or left, for example? Thank you.
This is a pretty good question. I don't know the age number. When I look at the protesters, they're mainly older people, not as many people in like the 20s or like starting the 20s. But that's a good question with right wing and left wing, because it's a wild mix. You know, like normally, like left wing people protest against right wing. For example, like the right wing, they protest against, no immigration in Germany, and then Antifa, the left wing, comes and they fight each other. And this time they're like, crazy people, like people who like believe that the Earth is flat. People from the right-wing sector, people from the left-wing sector, and they're all in this group together, which is like mind-blowing when you think of it, that these people, like this topic actually brought together like the hardcore left-wing and the hardcore right-wing. And I really don't know how they managed not to get into physical fights. But this is really something where I also don't get how left-wing people can like still, look in the mirror and say, yeah, I'm protesting, for rights in Germany with a Nazi next to me. Like how does this work out? So yeah, that's a pretty good question, but I don't know why this is like the entire spectrum from left to right to crazy is there.
Okay, thank you. Peter, is on you.
Yeah, it's 8 o'clock. Let me give a last chance. Is any of the cities wanting to say or ask or encourage another city based on what they heard from them, or anything that surprised you about the situation in other cities than your own?
First of all, I would like to say thank you, because I'm really enjoying the experience. So thanks for organizing. And then Daniel, I feel really sorry that the situation in Portugal is not going as well. To me, it's shocking to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else?
Well, generally about this, about the call, I think we should do this more often. I think that a lot of other vault cities should do calls like this. I think everyone is nodding, because especially in Europe, we often live in our, national or like regional bubble where we only like talk with other people from Stuttgart, and if you're very brave, we talk with someone from I don't know, Heilbronn, but we never talk with someone from Porto, for example. But this time we are actually like, we are all in the same party, we are all standing for the same values, and I think it's very refreshing that we can have a call where different Europeans who are all in the same party can talk about one subject. And I think this should be like, this types of calls should be, generally more often in entire Europe, but I think we as Volt would, should go ahead and promote this type of call.
Thanks, thanks, Moritz. Nice call. I'm sure we'll try to pick this up. My dream is to, as a next step, to also have the non-Volters, the public, with us, so that we, we really interact directly with citizens all over Europe. Johannes, you want to say a last few words for the public part of this get together?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I can join you in feeling that this was a very nice call, and I was sitting here 1 hour, and I think maybe my video showed that I was enjoying it a lot, and that is always great. And maybe a few key takeaways from my side. So that's my personal takeaway. So you may have other highlights. So I was really interested in this question of the federal versus centralistic response, and to hear that, like in Portugal, the feeling is more that a regional approach is best for the pandemic. I think it fits a lot in what is emerging across Europe. And if you look at the plans of the European Commission, then it's all about regional plans. And if I was talking about borders, the borders are closed now, but borders are actually cutting regions in part, which are working together instead of setting the borders according to the pandemic. All of this fits into the narrative that we have to talk about the Europe of regions and not a Europe of nation states, because somehow it does not fit. It does not fit a pandemic in specific, but it does not fit maybe in a lot of areas. And another point I find very important was the story about the mafia in Messina, because I think, at least from a German perspective, and maybe also from a Dutch perspective, it's always, or an Austrian perspective, it's like, yeah, they want our money, and it's like this zero-sum game, thinking that what goes to Italy is less there in Germany, but it's not that way. And I think it's important to see that we all lose. We all lose if the mafia has a stronghold or gets even stronger in southern Italy. It's a massive problem for the whole of Europe, and this should be. I mean, for me personally, I have no problem if my German or Irish tax money is spent somewhere in Europe, as long as it's spent sensible. So it's not important whether it's Spain, Italy, Ireland, Sweden, or Germany. So I think it's really important to think about the concept of solidarity here, and that it's not a zero-sum game, because we all lose if we don't manage to get our response on the economic recovery right. And the third thing, which was, I think, very interesting, I mean, I know obviously because I'm German about the protests in Stuttgart, but still it's puzzling. It's puzzling in a way, and I think maybe the real political fight actually is against these kind of conspiracy theories, because they influence politics in a very subtle and toxic way across the globe. I mean, we don't have to look to America, to the US, or we don't have to look to Brasilia, where we have a president in charge who believes some of these conspiracy theories. It's also toxic in our societies, and how to get our response right there, I think, is an unanswered question for me as well. So that I think that the call made very clear where are the potentials for reform on the European level, where are the weaknesses and where are potential solutions. So this I like very much. So thank you.
Thank you, Johannes. Thank you for those who have been following us on the various streaming channels. We will now ask those that can to switch off the live stream. We hope you will be back at the next event that we hope to be able to announce a little bit earlier. We are still learning. Thank you for your patience, and if you have any way to give us feedback, those that are on the streaming, most welcome. So now, assuming that we will be cut off from the public, we have a few minutes break, and then we start with the second part.
All right, I'm getting myself a drink, so see you in 5 minutes.
Yeah. Is there a way, Christian or Johannes, or maybe Vault YouTube is still there, to know that we are without live streaming?
Put out